This is how the Denver Broncos can make the playoffs in the 2024 season. Some of you guys may remember this series from last year. We are using the New York Times playoff simulator to go through each of the scenarios that could put the Denver Broncos into the playoffs. After their loss to the Kansas City Chiefs, according to the New York Times, the Denver Broncos have a 43% chance to make the playoffs. According to NFL Next Gen Stats, it's 53%. Each of these different outlets uses a different algorithm, so you're going to get different math each outlet you use. So this isn't obviously a perfect science. Anytime you do an exercise like this, it's going to have some flaws, but this is a fun way and a cool way to see the different scenarios, how the Denver Broncos can make the playoffs. So I want to go ahead and start off making one quick adjustment. It's looking like the Miami Dolphins are going to win against the Rams. I'm recording this in the middle of that video right now. So I'm going to go ahead and plug that win in there real quick. That shouldn't have too much of an effect. Miami still has a long way to go before they'll be back in playoff contention this year. Denver's biggest threats to the playoff for making the playoffs right now are the Indianapolis Colts and the Cincinnati Bengals. The Jets, had they won this week, would have been a threat as well, but right now it's probably just going to be between Indianapolis and Cincinnati. And the good news there for the Denver Broncos is that they play both of those teams this year. So let's go ahead and jump into the exercise here. For the purposes of this exercise, I am going to give the Denver Broncos a loss to the Falcons. That is not to say that I believe the Denver Broncos will lose to the Falcons. But if there is one game that the Denver Broncos can kind of afford to lose the rest of the way, it is the Falcons, because it's their final NFC opponent on their schedule. It would be the most inconsequential loss for them. If they win this game, and spoiler alert, I actually think Denver has pretty good chances to win this game, then fantastic. That will boost their odds even more. But for the intents and purposes of this exercise, we're going to go ahead and just give them the Falcons loss, just to give the Broncos a bit of a buffer, if that makes any sense. But after that, they have very winnable games on their schedule. Raiders on the road, Cleveland Browns Monday Night Football at home. That's their final game before their bye week. And then Indianapolis Colts at home. Those are all three very realistic wins for the Denver Broncos. Obviously, the Raiders are a big-time mess right now. They're one of the worst teams in football. Denver already beat the living crap out of them once this year. I don't see why they couldn't do it again and complete the season sweep on the Raiders. The Cleveland Browns, they have shown some signs of life since Jameis Winston took over as their starting quarterback, but I still believe that the Cleveland Browns are an inferior team right now to the Denver Broncos. I think Denver has shown a lot more in the games that they've played as an overall team, not just from the quarterback position. Yes, Cleveland was drugged down by Deshaun Watson, but I thought that the overall team effort was not quite as good as it was last year. So I think Denver could very easily win that game, especially since it's at home on Monday Night Football in prime time. I don't see why the Denver Broncos couldn't win that game. And then Indianapolis, they are also a mess right now. We don't know who the starting quarterback for the Colts is going to be for that game. Is it going to be Joe Flacco still? Is it going to be Anthony Richardson? We don't know. But I don't care if it's Flacco or Richardson. I think Denver stands a really good chance against Indianapolis. After that point is where things get a little bit spicy. Let's say that the schedule plays out how I'm thinking it's going to play out for these four games right here. New York Times says the Denver Broncos would have a 60% chance to make the playoffs. This Chargers game is interesting. I thought that Week 6 game at home against the Chargers was a trap game that the Denver Broncos ended up falling into. I think Denver's going to be a lot more prepared for the Chargers this time around. The Chargers have not swept the Denver Broncos since 2010. That was the 4-12 year with Josh McDaniels at the helm. I don't think the Denver Broncos are going to lose 2 consecutive games to the Chargers, but it could happen. So let's go over both scenarios. If the Broncos were to win that game, according to the playoff simulator, it would boost their playoff chances to anywhere within 82 to 84%, give or take a couple of percentage points. But if they were to lose that game, then it would drop them down to about a 40-ish, let's see where it lands, 46-ish% chance to make the playoffs. So obviously that would not be ideal. There might be one game that the Denver Broncos can afford to lose in the AFC as far as if they want to make the playoffs, but I don't know, man. I think the Denver Broncos are going to be in pretty good shape to win this game, so I'm going to chalk this one up as a Denver Broncos win. Cincinnati is going to easily be the toughest opponent for the Denver Broncos coming up on the schedule in terms of direct threats to them for making the playoffs, because Joe Burrow is playing like an MVP this year. The Bengals offense is clicking on every single level. The problem is they have one of the worst defenses in football right now. They've got depleted personnel on defense, and ultimately I think that is what's going to tank them as a football team. But anytime Joe Burrow and that offense is out there, they give the Bengals a chance. So let's again go over both scenarios here. If the Broncos pick up that win after winning against the Chargers, then that would pretty much lock them into the playoffs. That would put them at 10 wins. That would get them in pretty much by default. But if Cincinnati were to win that game, then their playoff chances would be somewhere around 76-ish%. Again, it's give or take. Then things would come down to that Week 18 game against the Kansas City Chiefs. And we don't know what is going to happen with the Chiefs for that game. Will they already have the number 1 seed locked up? If so, I could see them resting starters, but what if, God forbid, I want to puke, what if they do have a perfect season on the line here? Would they possibly consider playing their starters in that game? I don't know. It's looking like Kansas City is going to get the number 1 seed. If they do lose a game at some point between now and then, and they've already locked up the 1 seed before this point, I would not be surprised at all if Carson Wentz is the starting quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs and they pull almost all of their starters. That would obviously spell really good news for the Denver Broncos, and if the Broncos were to win, that would pretty much put them in, even if they lose to Cincinnati. But let's say that Kansas City is trying to go for that perfect season. Patrick Mahomes and company, they do end up playing. If Kansas City were to win that game, then it would drop Denver down to about a 62% chance to make the playoffs, which still is not bad at all, but you really don't want it to come down to that situation. You want to be able to take care of business against Kansas City, against Cincinnati, or even if you take care of business against Atlanta and then drop against Cincinnati and Kansas City, that still puts you in pretty good shape. So again, this Falcons game kind of acts like a buffer. If you win it, fantastic. That boosts you a little bit more. But if you lose it, then it might come down to this final game against Kansas City, along with some other tiebreakers to put the Denver Broncos into the playoffs. So right now, those are the scenarios that could get the Denver Broncos into the dance. If it ended today, they'd still have control of that 7th seed. They would still be in the playoffs. But again, man, right now, there's still a lot that has to happen between now and then. I want to go ahead and refresh this, actually, because I want to see what the current chances are. So currently, you have a 43% chance at a wild card. Obviously, your chances at winning the division are almost zero with Kansas City. And then you've got 57% chance at out according to this formula. But again, Next Gen has it at different models, so it's going to vary. You're probably not going to host a wild card because, again, you're probably looking at more like the 6th or the 7th seed as opposed to the 5th seed. And you're not going to win your division. So, yeah, you're probably going to go road all the way in the playoffs if you were to make it. All right, Broncos country, let me know in the comment section below. What chances do you give based on your formula and your math for the Denver Broncos to make the playoffs? Right now, on a scale of 1 to 10, I think the Denver Broncos' chances at making the playoffs are at about a 6.5. And it might be even higher than that. They control their own destiny right now, especially with the opponents that they play. But we have seen the Broncos fall on their face and crap the bed and not win games that they're supposed to win. So you never know, man. We will see what happens as time goes on. Be sure to leave a like on this video as well as subscribe and ring the bell so these videos appear in your notification feed. I would really appreciate it, guys. Those are both free and easy ways to show your support. Helps tell YouTube's algorithm to push us out, and it helps us get seen by more and more members of Broncos country just like you and me. And until next time, guys, I'm your host, Gage Madrid, saying peace out.